Hey, 42 here. At some point, I'm sure many of you have seen a list of the famously non-relevant interview questions asked at Google. Things like, how much would you charge to wash every window in Seattle? This is obviously a stupid question because no one would pay you as it never stops raining in Seattle, like, ever. Another question on the list is this. Imagine a country where everyone only wants boys. So if a couple have a girl, they have another child. If they have a boy, then they stop. What is the proportion of boys to girls in the country? A difficult question, and there's a lot of debate over the correct answer. But most people come to the conclusion that the answer is a 50-50 mix of boys and girls. But what we want to ask today is, do you really have a 50-50 chance of having a boy or a girl? Are there any genetic or environmental factors that can affect it? And is there really such a black and white, or should I say blue and pink, difference between the genders? So in the words of some woman who likes to stick meat on all her dresses, why was I born this way? Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes and 22 pairs are the same for both men and women. The 23rd pair though are the sex chromosomes, and women have two X ones, whereas men have an X and a Y, where the Y is much smaller than the X. The X chromosome has over 2,000 genes in it, whilst the Y has just 78. But before you start thinking that women have cheated by sneaking in a few thousand extra genes to play with, very soon after fertilization, one of the pair of X genes in women almost completely deactivates. So we all end up with a similar number in the end. For the first few weeks as a fetus, male and females are basically the same. Then the genitals go their separate directions. But although we see the equipment down there as being very different, it's more similar than you would think. The gonads either become testes or ovaries. The phallus becomes either a penis or a clitoris, which actually extends a few inches, it's just all internal. And the labia and scrotum are pretty similar bits of skin, just with a different, let's say, origami. It takes until the 16th week of pregnancy or later when we can peer in and see what sex a baby actually is and realise that we have to return all the pink dresses we bought because it has a dangly thing. So when you see how genitalia develop, you can realise that it's actually possible that they may not develop fully in one direction, since they start as pretty similar stuff. Now, depending on the definition, between 0.1% and 1.7% of people are born biologically intersex. Since their anatomy doesn't fall strictly into one category or the other, it lands somewhere in the middle. It's also possible to have both XX and XY chromosomes. There's even a very rare condition where the Y chromosome gets tagged onto one of the XX chromosomes. Many of these outcomes are very rare because it's very likely that these people won't be able to reproduce, so the characteristics don't get passed on through the generations. If only the same could be true for people who like to recline their seats on planes. I think we would all like the seat recliner gene to be deleted from the population. Alright, that's the development part and all the dangly bits out of the way, but how do the cells of you initially settle on their XX or XY configuration? Do the sperm in the egg arm wrestle for it? If you have a picture of Vin Diesel above the bed, does this increase your chances of having a boy? Right now, globally, the sex ratio is 107 boys for every 100 girls. The gender is decided by the sperm. A man produces two different sperm cells. One contains an X chromosome and the other contains a Y chromosome. So if the X fertilizes the egg, you get a girl, and if it's the Y, it's a boy. If it's the Z chromosome, then you get a wizard. Congratulations. As the X and Y contain different amounts of genes, like we mentioned before, this means that the X sperm is actually 1.03 times heavier than the Y sperm. The Y sperm is known to be more mobile, but the X has a longer lifespan. So then, it's possible, although not proven, that increased gravitational pressure during and just after sex could have some influence on the baby's gender. So maybe you should try sitting a bit differently if you've already engraved Jessica onto the crib. There are many myths out there about how you can influence the gender outcome of a child. From what point of ovulation you have to have sex at, to the type of breakfast cereal you eat, but nothing reliable has ever been proven. The reason almost all species end up with a 1-to-1 sex ratio is down to a thing called Fisher's principle. Imagine there are less male births than female. This would mean that a newborn male will have more people to mate with than a newborn female. So any parents that have a tendency to produce males will end up with more grandchildren. But then this tendency will spread, and soon the ratio will change, so the benefit of producing males stops. It's really only colony species such as ants and bees where this ratio doesn't apply. In bees, it's controlled by a fertilized egg being female and an unfertilized one being male. Females who are not destined for the queenhood are also fed a restricted diet so that their reproductive organs don't develop. It's the same reason why Prince Harry was fed exclusively on Pop-Tarts. Poor lad. Fisher's principle is just a natural balancing act, but surprisingly, there are environmental factors that can alter the human sex ratio for the population in any given area. Ralph Catalano, a Berkeley professor, published a report that said the ambient temperature would change the ratio, and a 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature could create 1 in 1,000 extra boys. Another well-established phenomenon is that after a war, the birth rate of males noticeably increases, as if the great galactic accountant is trying to balance the books somehow. But how is this possible? Our genes can't exactly see all the extra space around in the locker room and think, right, it's man-making time. Well, Dr. Corey Gelati suspects it's still all down to the Fisher principle. If you are a man from a family with more brothers than sisters, that means you probably produce more Y sperm than X. You're a man-making machine. If your family is mostly sisters, however, then you've likely got more X sperm. You're a female factory. When a major war comes and all the men get shipped off to battle, a family with more brothers has a greater chance of having at least one son return alive from battle. So there is a bigger proportion of Y sperm bias in the lads who finally return when the war is over. That's all life is really, sperm and statistics. Of course, no matter what the sex of a newborn baby, over their lifetime they are going to produce about 600 large cans of garbage and over 10 million litres of waste water. So maybe there are already enough Daves and Sarahs in the world, and I wouldn't mind finding a seat on the train every now and then, so perhaps you should just adopt a cat instead. Thanks for the view, subscribe for more, 42. For this lake bed is littered with hundreds of skeletal human remains, then you could be an extraordinarily intelligent person, possibly even genius level.